Good morning, everybody. I think it's time to start. My name is Luis Neves. I'm the CEO of GESI, the Global Enabling Sustainability Initiative. It's a great pleasure being here with you today. After a long time of being absent in my relations with the World Resources Forum, but I'm a fan of the World Resources Forum, and GESI has been a very good partner for many years. So it's really a great pleasure being here with you on this session, and I would like to invite the panelists, Dmitry Maryasin from UNICE, then Joanna Rosales from Wertmonde, Saskia Günther from Swisscom, and Suzanne Orlowski from Spherity. So warm welcome to all of them. So today our session is about digitalization and from growth to purpose. I'm sure that this will be a very interesting session. I think the key thing here is that we need to start thinking that the digital industry, as any other industry, we need to have a purpose. If I go back 20 years in my career, at the times that I was the Chief Sustainability Officer of Deutsche Telekom, our main problems at that time were very much supply chain driven. So our industry, the digital industry, spent a lot of time looking at the supply chain impacts. But today, if you look at our industry, you see that the amount of problems has been increasing dramatically. So from climate change to circular economy, to privacy and security, inclusion. So you see that our industry has been really on the top of the focus of many different stakeholders. And so I would say that our challenges have been increasing, but also the opportunities that digital industries can create have been increasing as well. And every single study that we have done in GESI show that the enabling impact of digital industries can be the answer to the challenges that we are facing, mainly in relation to climate change. But of course, for this to happen, we need to have a purpose. It's fundamental that we keep focus, that we understand that digital needs to be for good. And then as companies, as private sector, we need to look at the challenges that we have and resolve them and respond to those challenges in the most efficient way. And we can be very good in doing that. So with this introduction, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dmitry Maryasin, to present UNICE and what UNICE is doing in relation to digitalization, and how do you see us moving from growth to purpose as well. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Luis. Good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here to represent UNICE. I'll spell it out for you. It's United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. We're one of the 5 UN regional commissions. Our region, called Europe, interestingly covers countries from Canada to Tajikistan. So you can imagine both the breadth of perspectives and the political complexity of today. However, we are also special because we've been for 76 years now helping member states in this region and globally come up with high quality regulation and policy, specifically in sectors like transport, environment, energy, forestry, as well as trade and statistics. With this introduction, let me now turn to our topic today and talk to you about digitalization for good. As Luis very clearly put it, we're not talking about any digital today, but just those solutions and trajectories in how we allocate resources in digitalization that actually help us achieve sustainability goals. For United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, It's been a journey to integrate digitalization in a variety of regulatory tools and practices. Just in April this year, our member states decided that digital and green transformation will be our new cross-cutting theme. So you'll hear a lot about digital from UNICE in the coming months. But of course, the focus on sustainability is not new for us. Basically, ultimately, all we do is there to help our member states improve their policies towards much more sustainable development. And when I say member states and I say help, I don't just mean the 17 so-called program countries in our region that are countries in transition, former Soviet countries or former Yugoslav countries. I also mean working with partners and colleagues in Western Europe and United States and other parts of the region, where some of the challenges at the nexus of digitalization and sustainability are just as acute as they are in the developing world. Let me give you a few examples. And I broadly cover two areas. One is environmental protection and what role digital can play there. And the second one is, well, naturally, resource management, since we're at the WRF. In environmental protection, we see a very important role for a very boring thing that is called transforming how our databases work. Because you cannot talk about data-driven policy and higher quality decisions by policymakers. You cannot talk about allocation of resources. You cannot talk about real-life sensing or understanding of complex climate impact before you actually organize thousands and thousands of existing databases, registers, and cadasters that still very much are the basis for a lot of decisions around the environment assets that the world has, and in our region as well. So I won't go into the details, but that is one very important priority. The second one is improving online access to environmental information. And there UNICE is proud to host the Aarhus Convention, which is the only legal tool to actually ensure citizens have right of access to environmental information. But beyond that, we're working on tools, digital tools, such as remote sensing methods and satellite and aerial technologies, for example, to model and quantify the methane emissions from coal mines. We're doing this in partnership with many others. But if you take a country like Turkmenistan, which is one of the largest emitters of methane in this region, and you look at the profile that those emissions have in the bigger picture of emissions in the region, and especially in the short term, being able to track and being able to report live and being able to feed it back to the government, even if the government is not fully open to it, working with it on digitalization of their own understanding of methane emissions is where we are. It's a difficult path, but we believe it's very important to be on it. Another very important example is what our air convention is doing. We are monitoring transboundary airflows, and these are scientists working on very particular aspects of air pollution, looking at particle composition and so on. So again, this convention, the oldest of UNICE environmental conventions, now over 40 years old, is quickly digitalizing. So stay tuned. A lot of problems with air pollution in cities around the region, but very few common approaches to measuring, and then digitalized databases are still a big gap. And then the final example here is a really interesting database that UNICE has put together in partnership with the Islamic Development Bank, helping map vulnerability of transport routes in the Eurasian region to climate hazards, as well as, based on proxy indicators, map carbon emissions of various transport modes along the very important transport corridor that is now being transformed in the wake of in the aftermath of the war in Ukraine. And we need to make sure that this fast-growing transport corridor connecting Europe and Asia does not become a source of more emissions, more pollution. And I think real-time data gathering on that is another example of where decision makers need to be held accountable also. But more importantly, investors need to understand the consequences of their investments in certain types of infrastructure, in certain modes of transport, and then optimization of multimodal transport along the corridor is one of the top priorities when you think about a role that digital can play in reducing carbon emissions of the transport sector. I won't go into the details, but of course, our transport team is there to provide any details you're interested in. When it comes to natural resource management, you probably heard that UNICE is home to the UN Framework Classification of Resources and also a fast evolving UN resource management system. I'm very pleased to tell you that the UN resource management system has already digital tools in it. We plan to integrate AI solutions in it as an inherent part. And there will be other opportunities during this forum to hear more about that. So I'll leave it to the real experts to talk about it. But that's my first message when it comes to resource management. The second one is how we look at stocks of in the water. So we've been very active in the area of fisheries, and we have established what again sounds very, very boring. It's a little bit like how do you talk at 9 o'clock in the morning on the third day of an event about databases? I'm going to talk to you about standards for electronic data exchange. Even more boring than databases, but without it, nothing actually ticks and happens in this world. So data exchange standards is what makes cargo movements operable, is what makes ships come to port, and believe it or not, is what also is incredibly important for monitoring and managing the fish stock, especially with overfishing becoming a significant factor of, well, frankly, of survival of this planet, because it's part of a much bigger ocean ecosystems. You all heard about the World Ocean Summit. We're not an oceans agency, but we think that one specific solution can make a big difference when it comes to sustainability of fish stocks as one important element of that ecosystem. Another example I'll give is blockchain and other digital solutions like DNA markers that we have successfully applied in partnership with many private sector players in traceability in textile sector. You all know how important traceability has become once consumers, especially in more advanced economies, have become much more sensitive to the origin of the cotton of a shirt or a t-shirt they're wearing. Well, there is a whole science, but there is a much more difficult practice behind it, because you don't only need to have smart digital solutions like blockchain and IT people doing it. You actually need to go all the way through the value chain to the farmer in the fields, for example, in Uzbekistan, Chile, or Egypt. These are the three countries that were the pilots in our program. And then you need to build an alliance of partners locally and globally to make sure that Inditex or Hugo Boss actually is able to buy from sustainable sources that you help verify through blockchain. This is a solution that is scalable, that we recommend all countries that are producers of textile, leather, and other goods in similar value chains. These are solutions that are available and not so difficult to implement. And we've built what we call Sustainability Pledge as a platform, as a partnership between multiple private sector companies, policymakers, other international players like the International Trade Center, our partner in this, and of course the European Union, which is funding this work. And we are planning to apply similar approaches, digital traceability to critical minerals as the next step. And I'll be happy to talk about this maybe in the second part of the discussion. Obviously, critical minerals is what everybody's talking about right now. This is on the top of the minds of many decision makers, and many things need to be done from digitalization perspective to optimize the use of them, to enable circular economy solutions for critical minerals as one of the top priorities. And then, of course, to ensure security of supply. Securitization has become a priority, again, in the context of the war in Ukraine and other geopolitical shifts, but solutions that just close your market and make you make your supply sustainable in the short term are short-sighted solutions. Sustainability requires much longer-term view, and digitalization can be part of that. I'll leave it at this. Sorry if I took a bit longer, and I'm happy to answer any questions later.
Okay, I have to be tougher because otherwise we'll be running out of time. Thank you so much, Dmitry. So, Joanna, you're running a company, Vertmont. I will leave it up to you to say a few words about you and the company before you introduce the thematic that we are discussing here. I think you have a presentation, right?
Yes.
Can we have the slides?
Yes, there's separate. Thank you.
There you go.
Should be. Okay. So I just wanted to start with this slide because I come from LATAM, from Latin America, and I think it makes sense to put this into perspective. Yearly, 8.1 kilos of new electronics are coming into the market in LATAM. Every year, 6.5 kilos of electronics are being generated by each inhabitant in our region, but only 2.7% of these electronics are actually being collected and recycled properly, which means that most of it is still dumped or in hands of the informal sector or burned or buried. So just wanted to put this in as a way to start a conversation. Because in LATAM as well, like legislation in terms of EPR and any sort of electronic legislation are still very new. We do not have experience of 20 years of EPR's schemes, but it's coming. So from the other side of the electronics, I'm in the end of life of the electronics. What it means for us, sustainable IT practices. It will be something along the way of design for environment. Usually we are in love with innovation, but sometimes we don't really assess properly what's going to be the impacts of that innovation. So we talk a lot about innovating and digitalization, but we haven't seen the other side yet, what happens at the end of life. In terms of energy efficiency, yes, that is one of the best practices we've found in order to go and to speak about sustainable IT industry. Business models, this is, I think, where the circular economy and the big issue strikes. We have to get away a little bit of this monetization mode in which we just sell electronics to find new and more creative revenue streams that actually make it more sustainable. Although yesterday we already heard that sustainable development is an oxymoron, but yet this is one of the best practices that we found in sustainable IT industry. The other two that are very related with what Dimitri was saying, it's first supply chain transparency, and we were talking before about this in terms of secondary materials, like how to actually make them come back to the loop, how to trace that back to the loop, because we recyclers can do a lot and we can produce actually a lot of raw materials. But unless there's the demand to put that material back somewhere, it's very complicated. And the other thing of the economic incentives that being diverted from oil and mining is super important as well, because as long as this linear way of doing things and extracting resources is actually cut down, secondary raw materials market will never actually get in the way. And one of the more important things probably is the life cycle management, which we already know. It starts in, when producing the things, how to use them, how to dispose them, but actually getting into internalizing e-waste management. The disposal part should be already internalized. And this is a little bit related of one of the things that I've been listening here a lot regarding global EPR scheme. It makes a lot of sense to already kind of internalize that cost in the cost structure of IT equipment already. Then regarding the supply chain, just to end like a final note, the thing of, I believe probably decentralized mining and oil extraction actually will give a lot more innovation and technology development in the raw materials, second raw materials side, because as per now, we are investing a lot of time, energy, and resources, still trying to develop better that industry, whereas the secondary raw materials market, recycling, and so on, is still not really well invested, let's say, in this area. There it says global problems, global solutions. That was the title. So here are just like a couple of ideas of how could we better address this global issue. So that it would be, maybe we are needing a global treaty for sustainable IT and digitalization, like going beyond Basel and Rotterdam, Stockholm treaties and trying to develop a global treaty for sustainable IT. The other thing that might be much needed, a global circular electronics or circular economy treaty as well. We're starting with plastics and trying to have a global treaty around plastics, but probably this would be also an interesting thing, like taking into account electronics and actually everything and make a circular economy global treaty. Why? Because I don't know if it's just my perspective, but in a linear way, we can actually be independent, you know, like each country can do itself. But I think in terms of circular economy, it has to be a global effort or a regional effort like this, because not all of us, it cannot be a local solution. I mean, in terms of, let's say, LATAM or Ecuador, like going very down, we cannot put back materials into production because we are not really industrialized. There is a huge country in the world that actually produces most of the stuff that we all consume. So those countries are the ones that are going to be needed, the resources, secondary raw materials from the rest of the world. So I think it should be a globalized overview in terms of their circularity. And finally, and again, a global enforced EPR scheme that would probably level up some of the challenges that we've been having during the past 20 years in trying to solve the e-waste problem. And this is an interesting concept that as well. We can rebrand it later, but the idea is it's called shared extended producer responsibility. And it comes from a country from like Ecuador, where we mine a lot of natural resources, the metals that we need for everyday electronics use. And so far, producer responsibility has always been directed to the ones that are producing equipment with certain raw materials. So probably the missing link for a proper EPR to work should be including the raw materials producing companies, which means mining and oil, inside the scheme. So they are actually also have this little bit of responsibility in terms of the disposal or the end of life of the products produced with those materials. And that should be it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So, Saskia, you have been leading the Swisscom sustainability department. I would like to invite you now to let us know how do you see digital technologies and solutions that you are using really making an impact and moving from this growth perspective that our companies and the companies live to this more purpose-driven approach.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. So I will also go take the small clicker. It's a real pleasure to be here today, talking a little bit about sustainability at Swisscom. I think most of you know Swisscom is the biggest telecommunication ICT company in Switzerland. We have a history of sustainability, which is in fact over 25 years old. And for us, it's really a part starting of our vision, our values, our customer promise, and our strategy. It's part of what we are doing and part of our business. We also decided to put our responsibility in the core of our sustainability strategy, saying that for us, responsibility means leading the way, but not one day now. And I think that's the point. We cannot wait anymore. We have to act now. But maybe just ask you one question. When you think about digitalization, mobile connection. How much more do you think today we are using mobile connection? Is it twice more than 10 years ago? 10 times more? 50 times more? What do you think? It's even more. It's 200 times more. So we see there's an exponential growth of digitalization. So when you see that, you have two choices. You can look at it, or you can see how can you reduce the impact of digitalization and how can you use the positive chances that digitalization is offering. So let me give you just one example of our quite big sustainability strategy, taking just climate and showing you what we are doing there. We decided to set two main goals. On the first, we want to reduce our own footprint significantly in order to become a climate neutral company in 2025. Now, as a day, today, 2023, we already reduced our footprint of our operation of 87%. So we are on a good way there, but we still have quite a lot to do. And we also set another objective, as we saw that there is a huge potential to support customers, to support the society in enabling good digital technologies that will have a positive impact on climate. And we said, okay, we will set the goal to have a positive contribution of 1 million tons of CO2, which is in fact 2% of the Swiss CO2 emissions. So let me give you two examples of each of these goals. First of all, regarding our own footprint. When you think about telecommunication, most of the time you think about electricity. So I give you an example on our electricity consumption. We are quite a big consumer of electricity in Switzerland. We are working on efficiency programs since already also 25 years about trying to find new technologies, like, for example, implementing fresh air cooling instead of climatization in the fixed network, in the mobile network. And in the last years, we were able, thanks to that, to stabilize the energy consumption despite the growing data. And we thought, in fact, it's not enough. It's still not enough. Even if we are using 100% renewable electricity since already 2010, as the demand of electricity is growing, we need to find ways to reduce the electricity consumption so that we have enough for everybody. So we said, okay, we have to break the energy curve and set us the target to reduce the absolute electricity consumption by 30% until 2030. It's a good number to remember, 30-30. And there we are working quite a lot with partners. And I think that will be also key in the discussion today, the collaboration. You cannot do things alone anymore today if you want to achieve great goals. You have to work in the whole supply chain with partners. But let me give you a second example on the enabling effect. We are quite convinced that there are a lot of technologies already available today that everybody could implement. But we are also convinced that we need innovative solutions taking into account a positive impact on the Sustainable Development Goals. And when you see in Switzerland, there are about 50,000 startups rising up every year. And there are quite some great ideas. So we decided to have a venturing and investment in those solutions. We believe they could really make a big difference. We also decided just this year to build up a foundation of deep tech investment in Switzerland in order to push innovation in the country, really taking into account the different SDGs. In the last 2 years, we already invested in several companies, as you can see here. And I will give you one example, which I like quite a lot. The company is called Eco Robotics. And their idea is using digital data on a high-tech IoT system, where with the cameras, and you can see it behind, they can look at where exactly they need to put some herbicides so that it's not put everywhere. With this technology, they proved to be able to reduce herbicide consumption by up to 95%. So just think a moment. How would the world look like? It's just one solution. If today we switch, put on, scale up this technology and use worldwide 95% less herbicide, what would it mean for water quality, for biodiversity, and for CO2 for sure? All these herbicides that do not need to be produced anymore. And that's why we're investing in these kind of companies, because we think they're a great solution that could help us to reach the targets that have been set for 2030 and 2050. Maybe to stop and conclude, as I said, we have quite a long history of sustainability. We had also the chance to be now third time in a row receiving the recognition of the most sustainable telecommunication company in the world. But we know that even us have a lot to do to make sure that the whole world, because it's global issues we are speaking about, even if we are in Switzerland, can reach the targets that have been set. And that's why we are taking our responsibility as quick as we can, but also really trying to support innovation for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Saskia, for giving us an update of your great developments. So, Suzanne, Spherity, how is Spherity using the power of digital solutions to address these challenges that we are facing?
Yes, thank you. So maybe I also go to the clicker because I need it. Thank you for this slide. And I think that if we talk about innovation and we talk about digitalization, we actually have to talk about concrete means and concrete ways how we can maybe facilitate that better. And for that, I took actually the theme of the conference to come to the point that I want to make today. And I don't have too many complex slides, just a sentence per slide. And I just want to invite you to follow me on a journey of my thoughts. So sustainable use of resources needs the collaboration of all stakeholders. Collaboration of stakeholders, what does that mean? That means we somehow talk to each other, right? We enter into contracts, we pick up the phone, maybe we even, travel to a partner to talk with him, to enter into the contract and so forth. But is that possible with all the companies in our supply chain, in all the companies of the supply chain, maybe of Swisscom? No, it's not. So collaboration always also means data exchange. Now, data exchange is something that needs to work globally, right? Because today we have, as I already said, global supply chain. And also Joanna said that it is needed that data can be exchanged not only in Europe, but also to China, from China and Japan and other areas of the world to allow to give us the information that we need for our products. But data exchange today is very often difficult, and it's also very consuming of energy. And there are a lot of silo solutions in the world. And what we cannot do today, or very soon, hopefully we can, but most people cannot do it today. You cannot exchange data ad hoc with a company that you don't know yet. So for example, if you need a product from China, do you know if that company is really working in a sustainable way? How is the data coming to you? Can you trust it? So today's systems that we have are energy consuming. They're not maybe trustworthy, especially not with companies that I do not have collaborated with yet. So for the data exchange and to reach our sustainability goals, the European Commission has introduced the concept of the digital product passport. Now, the digital product passport is a construct of the European Commission. However, it requires us to exchange data globally again. And the European Commission is asking for a concept that is decentralized. So that means that there's no central system there that kind of, if it's shut down, then the entire kind of data flow is not working anymore. It needs to be decentral, and you need to make ad hoc connections to the always changing, daily changing, maybe suppliers of your products. And it needs to go worldwide. And what is the digital product passport? For those that maybe do not know that yet, the digital product passport should facilitate us to reuse, repair, recycle products at the end of its lifetime, but it should also prove that the products are coming from sustainable sources and that ESG criteria are actually met from the products. Now, we're talking a lot about digitalization, and there are a lot of big software companies out there maybe, and I'm looking maybe at SAP or Microsoft or Oracle or Google or you name it. And the digital product passport is not the next big cash cow for IT companies. And why is that important? Because we have to go fast to our goals. We have to make it a success. Data exchange and collaboration needs to go fast and cheap and easy, especially for small companies that are the highest number of supply chain actors. They're not the big companies with the big money and the big ERP systems. They're the small actors along the value chain that need to quickly be able to supply the data to the collaboration and to provide also data to the digital product passport in Europe, but worldwide to the supply chains that we need to get the data that we want to make our products more sustainable. So therefore, the digital product passport technology must be based on open standards. And open standard means not I can read the specification online, but it also means that it doesn't imply any fees so that I can actually participate and use that standard. It must be open source. That means that there's reference implementations available that I can use so that I can actually quickly participate at that ecosystem myself, and also that is actually security tested, because all current security technology is open source, because everyone can see what's happening. A lot of companies have validated it, which is very, very important, especially for security. And we have a lot of business confidentiality issues also, right, in our supply chain. Not everyone wants to change the data with everyone. It needs to be permissionless. That means I need to be able to participate at the system without anyone giving me the permission to participate at that system. And finally, again, it needs to be decentralized. Now, there's already a big system that we use today that follows those rules and has brought it to success. What is it? It's the World Wide Web, right? It's the internet. The internet, as it is today, it follows those rules. And what we need for the data exchange to reach more sustainability, to have more collaboration, it needs to follow those rules as well, yeah, because we need to be fast, it needs to be open, everyone should be able to participate quickly. And this is how we can reach our goals: more collaboration for sustainable resource use, And therefore, no product without a product passport. And if you want to get in touch, you can scan in the code or just come by later on. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Suzanne. So we had the first round of introductions. I was listening to all of you and I was thinking about something. So if you think about the digital world, think back 15 years and think now and think the next 10 years with AI, ChatGPT, and so on and so on. The thing is, the digital world is moving at the speed of the light much faster every day. And the way that technology is developing is posing us huge and different challenges. So we have two options here. Either we use these technologies with a purpose for good, but that requires a fundamental change in the way that we have been looking at them. Because companies, multinational companies, or any company is driven by growth. And growth is very important because growth sustains jobs, sustains good living. But growth can also be a problem. So I do not know if in 20 years' time, we can live the way that we're living today. We need to think that in a couple of years' time, not very far, this planet will have probably 10 billion people, 11 billion people. And we know that, and the World Resources Forum has that data and has been working on that. We know that the resources that we have today, we consume them in a couple of months. So I think now, Matthias, we are already living the next couple of months without resources. We have consumed the resources that we have for this year already. And so in any business, this is not sustainable. So we need to think the world also in a different manner. And I think it's important today, as we are here talking with each other, that we have a kind of more interactive conversation here with the panel. You've listened to the different perspectives. You see that companies are doing fantastic things, but the challenge is that what we are doing is not enough, is far from being enough to respond to the problems that we are faced with in the upcoming years. And so the fundamental question is, how are we going to address this in our different roles? So you're developing the digital product passport, fantastic. It's bringing more transparency. We understand better where things are coming from. We can tackle the problems at the very beginning. We can change things. Then we have the company from Johannes that is looking at e-waste. Then UNICE from more the policy side and Swisscom more from the private sector side. How do we, in our different roles, can accelerate the response to the challenges that we are facing? I'm going a little bit out of the book, but how do you see it, Dmitry?
Well, I think you challenged us to think what's coming in the next 10 years. 10 years ago, we had no clue about some of the things that are common daily knowledge for all of us. And if we think that Google didn't exist 26 years ago, it makes you realize that we're in for a dramatic shift, a transformation of multiple sectors of the economy, of the society, of the ways of living. Imagine no Google Maps, for example, right? Just for a minute. And those of you who still remember how we used to navigate when we were traveling. As a very simple, common example, that then has analogies in sectors in much more sophisticated, technologically complex ways. And what I do believe is important is that both on the sustainability side and on the digital side, we are able to think in multiple scenarios. We don't know what the future holds. We cannot be future-proof, but we can be more future-ready. And we need to have much more strategic foresight on at the nexus of sustainability and digitalization. Of course, we also need to look at security risks, and we need to look at the role of AI. And this is very much in the press, but I'm not seeing enough in the press about what are some of the potential big shifts, how the current megatrends will affect industries from the point of view of the nexus of digitalization and sustainability. Let me give you one example. We all know the power of platform economy. Yeah, so we probably all are using Amazon or Alibaba or a similar platform to buy things, to get them delivered to our home. What is the potential to use platform economy for scaling up circular economy? Is this a question that policymakers and large corporations are asking themselves today, with the global circular economy rate being estimated between 10 to 15%, and it's mostly developed countries, even in the European Union, it's not more than 12, 13% on average. What is the market potential for using the Amazon for reverse deliveries, for the massive logistics infrastructure that exists on the platforms economy, the power of online shopping, reimagined, reversed, for every one of us being able to dispose of this in a way that generates value. Yeah, we know how many critical minerals are hidden in this little device. In addition to this being a time sucker, it's also a very valuable piece of equipment. So now we don't have that yet technologically doable and scalable. What about 10 years from now? Who is going to be the next entrepreneur that is going to become a billionaire out of this, but who can actually, through becoming a billionaire, change to the better the way we recycle really at scale? Not as a green activism movement, but as a thing we do, like now we order a book or another good online, naturally, without thinking, without a value statement attached to it. We're just doing it. We didn't do it 20 years ago, and we do it now. How can we make sure our choices and behaviors are much closer to material free world, much closer to carbon neutral world 10 years from now? And what are the digital technologies like platform economies can do? What can they do for that? That's how I would approach it. And then from our perspective, we need to bring, and I agree, collaboration is really key. We need to bring the Amazons of this world, the policymakers, the regulators, to think about the unimaginable in one room, and the strategic foresight across sectors is what I believe will be a very important how we make it happen.
Thank you. So Saskia, we have been working together for quite a long time, and one of the things that we have been doing is looking at the role of digitalization to help companies to achieve sustainability goals. And we've done a lot of research in GSE with the smart reports and the digital with purpose report as well. How do you see that happening in Swisscom? So you are a digital company, but digital is helping you to accelerate, to achieve your own goals?
I think I will come back maybe to the two sides, a little bit of the mirror, and the two sides also of the objectives that we have set. Maybe I go even one step back. I'm myself an environmental scientist, and most of the subjects we are speaking today about, we know them since many years. When I speak about climate, most of the time I learned it 40 years ago, and not now. For sure, digitalization changes to find new things. And to find also new idea how to improve. And maybe I give two examples of what we are doing and how we are using digitalization. At Swisscom, in the company itself, taking the example of mobility, I mean, 1/3 of CO2 emission are coming from mobility. We are doing two things. First, we're using digitalization. As in our fleet, we have 2,400 vehicles. In each vehicle, we have a sensor where we can have all kind of data making sure that we understand how the vehicle is driven, which routes are taking, in order to be able to optimize and reduce. Because we need also this to think about how can we do less, still on the same way, having the same results, but using less resources. But on the other side, for sure, also, we look at new technologies. And there we decided, for example, to have our entire fleet of 2,400 vehicles completely electric by 2030. And in the next 2 years, we want to have 1,400 electric vehicles. So really trying to implement what is already available today and very consequently. And regarding digitalization, we also learned quite a lot of this other side. What can we do to kind of supporting a snowball effect? Because trying to become better as a company, if you cannot have a little bit more impact, that will not really help the world at the end of the day. So we thought, okay, we have now already 25, 30 years of experience in climate. We have in Swisscom amazingly good data analytics know-how. And we thought, okay, so then we could maybe also in collaboration with other companies, we are working there also with startups, try to build up a very good kind of offering for our B2B customers to get that what both of you spoke about, starting to have very good data transparency, because a lot of companies still do not have enough data to understand where to put, in fact, the priorities that they should put today. And therefore, having this data transparency, thanks to digital technologies, and then after being able to implement new measures, like, for example, better efficiency in all the buildings, thanks also to IoT technologies, or like I said, in the fleet or in the management of the own people. For example, commuting of people is also a huge topic, and there are also already good solutions. How can we sensitize people to reduce their own footprint? And for that, you need the data. So that's what you said before, and that's the advantages that we can have. And you said before, Luis, that we work already a lot together, and JC made quite a good study showing that, in fact, 20% of CO2 emission of the world could be reduced thanks to intelligent digital technologies. So we have to find them, and then we have to try to really push this snowball effect to implement them very quickly.
Thank you, Saskia. So, Joanna, you told us about Wertmund. I didn't know the company, but you're doing some amazing things. My question to you is that how can one strike the balance between the benefits of technological advancement or the use of digital technologies and the need for sustainable practices in a disposable culture?
So in terms of sustainable IT practices, as I just mentioned, I think it's still a matter of traceability and going back to understanding and wanting to know really where the things are coming from the side of the producers, let's say, and also from the consumers. I really need to understand and be worried and want to learn and know where the things that I'm consuming come from. I think that is the important part of being a responsible consumer. And in the other side as well is it's a matter of, as I mentioned, like these business models in terms of just selling equipment every year, the new model, a new model. That has to definitely shift. There should be a shift in the patterns of consumption. So that means that producers might need to find a way to have new revenue streams, and also from the side of the consumers, we need to unlearn these patterns of buying just stuff probably that we don't need, and improving our consumption in terms of repairability. We just lost that because it's not convenient, because it's not easy, because it takes time to make your things repaired, and reuse them, repurpose them. We've also lost that because now everything is super easy. It's easier to buy something new than actually to repair something or to reuse something. So that is one of the other challenges in terms of consumption patterns that I think will drive faster a change in terms of sustainability in the IT industry. But it all comes from consumers. Actually, I think we can actually drive that change. But as it was mentioned yesterday, there are really very, very few people willing to do so, and probably that's the problem. We're very little people, few people trying to understand where my equipment is coming from and what was needed to build and produce this phone. How much energy does it take to make this phone? So unless we change that, yeah.
Do you think we can change that?
Yeah, for sure, but it would take a little longer. And we were talking about this recently during this panel. And yes, but it will need something striking to happen. Probably COVID was not enough. Something striking to happen in order for all of us to get that. Because at here, I think we all understand this and we're kind of worried. But actually, there's a lot of people out there that should be in this room and they're not. That can actually need this and help this happen. But yeah, it will take time.
Yeah, you look very optimistic.
Yes.
So Suzanne, you mentioned already the digital product passport. So Spherity is developing and already developed digital solutions to trace raw materials. I read about your Made It Trace project. You mentioned digital product passport, and the intention is to enable a degree of trustworthy information within the circular economy, so bring more transparency. So what are some different methods that digitalization in digital solutions can enable sustainability?
Yeah. So thank you for the question. First, let me make a comment on transparency, because transparency, if I'm a manufacturer of a good, it might frighten me that someone else gets transparency about my supply chain. Most manufacturers do not want that, and it's actually their right to maybe not want that it's really open and transparent to everyone, because a successful product very often is caused by a successful supply chain. The companies that deliver good quality to me, and maybe I don't want everyone to know it. So I want to stress here that digital product passports are possible, but without giving transparency to everyone. Giving digital product passports mean giving information to people that need it to make the right decision in a certain role for a certain use case. So a recycler might be able to see the material that is actually in a battery or in an electronic device, but not necessarily who bought it from whom and who kind of refined it further and so forth. So that's one important point that I want to make. And to the other question, is, so what technology do we want to use? And what we stand for is the decentralized approach, that companies go back into a more self-sovereign way of owning data. Yeah, because today we're used to bringing our information to central platforms. We're loading it up to Google, we use Facebook, we also use industry central platforms where we have to provide our product data and so forth. And then it's out of date, you don't know if the quality is right. It's redundant, so I have to maybe send it to that system and to that system and to that system, which causes a lot of energy and so forth. And we can save it here by going a decentralized approach where I have my data, I declare my product information, but I keep it for myself. And everyone who's authorized can come to me, can see my product information, can see my greenhouse gas emissions report, can see my child labor or ESG certifications and stuff like this. So we need to go to a more decentralized approach. Again, is the approach that I believe is the only way to make this all work. And another comment that I wanted to also give to the acceleration of this. I mean, the digital product passport is kind of has been defined. It is regulated under the new battery regulation and under the Eco Design for Sustainable Products regulation. But for me, it takes too long. I don't know why we have to move the dates from 1st of January 2026 to now 2027, and there are not even concrete dates for electronics, for textiles, and so forth to have a digital product passport. Why? I mean, if I think of Germany, in the last year, we have moved from one energy source to a total different energy source in 1 year, kind of, You wouldn't have thought that's possible, but if you really make pressure, it's possible. Why is there so little pressure on all these sustainability topics? It's not fast enough for me. And I think consumers, there's consumers in this room, they try to repair things and take the extra time, extra load. But the masses, you have to enable the masses to actually take the right decisions, and more sustainable products need to be cheaper than not sustainable products. And that's how you kind of accelerate and also get the masses to use sustainable products.
Thank you. So we have roughly 20 minutes up to the end of the session. And I would like to give the opportunity to all of you to ask any questions to the panel as well. So I can see 1, 2, 3, let's go around. So maybe with you, state your name and then your question, please.
Yeah, hello. Leon Ferrari, I'm a PhD in, it's about raw material supply. So I never heard the thing of creating like less data, because behind data you have also infrastructure, database, servers, like you need to transport it, to store it. We hear about digital product passports, so storing data in literally every object, storing data in every vehicle, but all of this has an impact. I never heard less data. So how would you do less data? Because it has an impact. IoT is lots of tiny equipment composed of a lot of raw material, really hard to recycle because sometimes it's really mixed. So we also have to collect them. They're really small, getting harder. How do you do less in digitalization also? Thank you.
Very good question. So this will go to Suzanne. We have another question. Who's the second question over there?
Yes. Hello.
Yes. Your name,
Hi,
please.
I'm Dave Knight, the convener of the Roundtable on the Responsible Recycling of Metals. And thank you very much for a very interesting panel. And I wanted to ask a question on this point about transparency. I'm very interested in the point that Suzanne made about providing information, but not giving away details on who the suppliers are. And we note in many of the supply chains at the moment that this information is not flowing. So the question is, what are the enabling factors that will give confidence to the value chain to provide pertinent information on ESG risks further shared with the value chain downstream and other stakeholders?
I didn't understand it. It was too low.
So instead of providing information...
Can you speak up? Can you speak up a bit, please?
Instead of providing information on the suppliers, we want to encourage the flows of information on environmental, social, governance risks in the supply chain so that we can act on them. But that information is not flowing at the moment. And so how do we provide the confidence to those suppliers to provide this information?
Okay. Third question here.
Thank you. I'm Vijay, a journalist. So my question is from a consumer perspective to Suzanne. So you mentioned a point that struck a question in me, which is sustainability premium. That's part of business models these days. If something is organic, if something is sustainable, then the companies ask the consumers to pay more. Would digitalization bring the price down so that the masses can see the benefit, instead of paying just more money. Because when we think of masses, premium is not what comes to my mind.
So Suzanne, you got 3 questions, so I will hand over to you.
Okay, I'm very glad I have a piece of paper here that I can write down something. So the first question was, and thank you for the questions. The first question was about less data. I would say we don't need less data. But if you think that, information about a product, for example, is replicated a lot of times to different systems everywhere flowing around, we can minimize that to it's available once. So we have the same information, but we have not replicated it everywhere. Yeah. So maybe that already reduces the need for power, energy, and storage, and so forth. So I think we need data. Maybe we even need more data available on different sources than we have it today. But I personally believe most of the data is already available. What's coming more is that we have the calculation of the greenhouse gas emissions and product carbon footprints and so forth. So there's data the data needs to be added to the information that we have today. Yeah, but still we can reduce kind of the efforts to make that data available. So I think, yeah, we're on a fine way. That's absolutely, I think we're on a good way there. I didn't fully get the transparency question, but I'm trying to share a point here that I want to make. With verifiable information in the way how we implement the product passport with decentralized technologies, decentralized identities, and verifiable credentials is kind of the technical terms. You can ask a supply chain questions without revealing concrete data. Yeah, there's concepts such as zero knowledge proofs where you can even not reveal any data. You can just ask a question, is kind of generally this material in that product? And then it's a yes or no question. And with that, you're not revealing actually how much of the material is in there. So you will get the answers that you need with the technologies that we provide and that are currently also in the concept of the European Commission, how to build the passport. And with verifiable credentials, you make data also verifiable. So you can minimize the risk that the information that you get is fake. If the data is not verifiable, your risk goes higher, that you actually have valid information. And about the last question, at the moment, sustainable products are premium products. So I agree that, I mean, data cannot just bring down the cost of a bio product or maybe more sustainable product, because it means more effort in the supply chain. It is more costly sometimes, but what it can bring down is that you just put some label on it and it's more expensive, but there's actually not much sustainable processes behind it because they just claim it. And therefore we have the new Green Claims Directive that also should shed some light in here, where you have to actually prove that your product is sustainable, and this will bring more transparency to the customer. And in this point, I really mean transparency. Yeah, what price does cost which product, and what am I getting for it actually? Yeah, I hope that answers your questions.
Okay, Saskia.
Yeah, I would like just to add something to the question of less data, because from a theoretical point of view, I agree with you. But at the same time, I think yesterday here you spoke also about sufficiency, and it's something very important to think about it. But in sustainability, we are quite habituated to look at the different views, different conflict of interest, and if you, with data, you can achieve a positive impact, which is 3 times higher than the impact of 1 gigabyte of data, then it makes sense to have this data. That's the kind of balance that you have to make. And as I said also, where I agree that maybe the problem is not the data, the problem is how they are transmitted, stored, and utilized. We need to make sure that the technologies that we are now continuing to improve and changing will be much, much more energy efficient. So if you look at mobile connection, here we already find out that 5G technology would have per unit of data transmitted 85% less CO2 emission than the previous technologies. So ensuring that the new technologies reduce the impact will allow also to go in this trend, and the trend is clearly increase of data.
Dmitry and Joanna, would you like to make any comment to the three questions?
Just on less data, there will not be less data. I'm sorry. I think there will be much more data every minute we live on this earth. The question is the patterns of use of data. They are very linear still. We have multiple people using data many times over without talking to each other. There is actually this circularity in the use of data is becoming a very important topic as well. And then of what we talked about here and many examples, how can you use the power of data to reduce emissions? So yes, data is a problem also from the point of view of emissions. Yeah, especially if you open a big data mining center. Yeah, I mean, the paradox in some of our countries in the transition economies is that they invest in renewable energy. Yeah, so for example, small hydro, which is supposed to power community centers and local production and empower women. And instead, this is used to power data mining centers to earn money, not for the women in the rural areas. So these are the paradoxes, is how, but then of course, we can put data to use to optimize traffic, to reduce deaths on the roads, to fleet management was mentioned. Imagine fleet management at global scale, not just in one company. Yeah, and imagine this for the large emitters like the ships that transport everything under the sun. So there, I think there will be more data with every minute, but it's up to us to ensure that data use is circular and that we use data to power reducing emissions.
It's interesting because I understood your question in a totally different way. The way that I understood your question was, we're talking a lot about data, but the IoT devices that you need to deploy, which are increasing the amount of data, why don't you use less IoT? Because by doing that, you would be reducing also resource consumption.
Yeah.
That was the way I understood the question as well. But please.
Yeah, thank you for the discussion. My name is Tiina Nyfors. I'm a doctoral student at the University of Helsinki, and I would like to continue on this sufficiency topic. So Saskia mentioned that at Swisscom, during the past 25 years, sustainability has been an integrated part of the business. But I think the graph you showed like increasing emissions during this time, despite efficiency measures. So bringing in this sufficiency perspective, I'm curious, could you perhaps focus on needs? Would that be something to consider, like what is actually a need when it comes to the services you provide, and then and growth in them, and then also perhaps consider something like what is enough? Thank you.
Saskia?
Yes, maybe I can comment. The graphic that I showed was not our emissions. It was not a graphic on our emission, but it was a graphic of the growing of data and technologies due to the data. It had nothing to do with our emissions. So I would have shown the emission, then I said I will reduce 87%, then it would have gone down. So just to comment on that, regarding the second part of the question, maybe I can make a link to circular economy, because I think Joanna said it before. It's quite difficult if the consumer wants a new smartphone every 2 years to make a real difference. But if you look at this device that most of you have in your hand, most people do not know that 80% of CO2 emission is coming from production. And in fact, if you don't produce it, then you have already done quite a lot positive. So companies, we are not the only one at Swisscom, but we started already in 2012 with that, trying to get back the smartphones of the people to refresh them and put them again on the market. So, and the second-hand market is growing slowly, we have to admit that, slowly, but mostly also the new generation start to be very interested to have second-hand smartphones. And the issue is in fact quite huge, because if you take just Switzerland, but probably in the other countries, you have kind of similar numbers. We have about 8 million of smartphones not utilized at all in some tiroir, sorry, in the houses of the people. And it's so much unutilized resources that could be reused or at least recycled. We spoke also about mining and all these very valuable resources that we cannot get back because they're small. It's not like a fridge. If you don't need your fridge anymore, then you bring it back. But a small smartphone, you let it just somewhere. And that's really something we have to change to improve that.
So we have 2 minutes, so we need to come to a close. I would like to stress here something which I think is very important. We had a very good debate from my perspective, technical debate, but bottom line, and this is related to the smartphones to some extent, bottom line, this comes to us as citizens. We are not ready to give up anything in our lives. And this brings me to the question that the colleague from Finland was raising. This is about the needs. We need to repurpose our future. We cannot continue to live in this growth pathway, which is totally unsustainable. And we have a responsibility to ensure that the planet will exist in the upcoming years. We know that in spite of all the efficiencies that we are generating, is not enough. Carbon emissions continue to grow. And we see the implications of that and the destruction of that as well. So I would like to end with a call to all of you. Rethink your purpose as citizens. We need really to think differently about our needs. And we need to think, what are the needs that will ensure the sustainability of the planet in the next 20 years? And this is a fundamental question to all of us. We cannot only think about business or business as usual in our lives. We should not wake up in the morning and do our normal life. I think our first thought in the morning is that what can I do better today to ensure the sustainability of the planet in all my activities? It can be on my job, in the way that I go to school, in the way that I take my kids, in the way that I eat, everything. So I would like to leave you with this note to think about, because resources are infinite. We have just been challenged in Jesse to be part of a project about deep sea mining. So what we have on Earth is not enough. Now we need to go to the sea and exploit the sea. We know the consequences of mineral exploitation on Earth. So we know the mistakes that we have done, but we are going to do the same mistakes in the oceans. This cannot be. There is something wrong here. And I'm leading a business organization with many multinational companies. We have been discussing for over 20 years what we were discussing here today And I must say, I'm going very sad from this conversation because we're talking about the same things that I spoke 20 years back. And the problems that I discussed 20 years ago are the same problems that we have today. So that means we are failing, we are not making progress. And this is our common responsibility. And I hope that we can work together to change this path. But bottom line, this comes back to us as citizens. It's the way that we live that is really impacting our world. That's my personal view. I don't want to end up with a not so much optimistic position, but I would like to invite you to rethink the way that we live, because that will be the fundamental change that you can make. So in 20 years' time, we will ensure that the planet is still here in a better shape for future generations. Thank you so much to all of you for your contributions, for your insights. Thanks to all of you also for your questions and your participation. And I do hope that the forum will continue in a successful way moving forward. Thank you so much.